How's it going, chumps? This is the Chump Change Trader channel, and I am going to walk through a couple of things. Sorry, the previous video didn't upload on time, so it doesn't really matter too much actually because I still couldn't trade on that particular account that I had just made. So I think tomorrow, after the third day of the funds settling, remember it's a small account, brand new account, so everything had to sort of settle, and I get that. I decided, okay, well, if I wasn't going to be able to get that Iron Condor that I had mentioned in the previous video down, I'll just do it on one of the other accounts that I manage. So I did it on this separate account with the pretty much the exact same parameters that I was initially mentioning about a 385 short put, a long 380, a short 445 call, and a long 450 call on SOXX. And this trade actually was executed yesterday. And so let's actually just walk through what would have happened if I did have that executed into the account. So once the trade was placed in, today we have a couple of things, to just sort of consider. Now, everything was gravy actually yesterday when the trade was placed in. I believe if we look at the last 3 days, we can see that yesterday we had a small move downwards and then it finished pretty much right smack in the middle. And so that was sort of like nothing to really write home about, in the sense that basically when I put the trade on, I think I probably had placed it somewhere around, I would say, mid-morning. So yeah, mid-morning, which would have been flat. So nothing happened in the Iron Condor. And actually it's funny because an Iron Condor benefits the most for when there is no directional move. If you remember that the profit profile looks like this, from the point in which you are at 385 and some change all the way to 445 and some change, or just 445 flat. This is pretty much where you're going to max out your profit margins on this particular trade. And so this green line right here denotes where the current stock price is. And so we were pretty much flat, like right smack in the middle. And of course, this blue line right here on Thinkorswim shows you what the current profit margin is right now. But as you would know, if you sell premium to or sell contracts as your main source of where your money is going to come from, your hope is that you're using time decay on your side. So let's walk through kind of what happened today. So today we had all the news about Credit Suisse actually basically not being able to fulfill their financial obligations, right? A very similar thing that's happening to SVB, minus the idea that somebody is considering bailing them out. And so that is sort of what really started to affect the markets. And as soon as the markets opened, it climbed down lower. So even though SOXX has nothing to do with banks, so to speak, but everybody uses banks. And so that's one of the reasons why the financial sector or the banking sector is so very tied closely to the entire market. Even oil, which is typically what's called non-dependent on the S&P or the NASDAQ or any of the indexes, also took a hit too, in terms of being able to not be able to rely on the price stability of the currency or the banking situation. So yeah, so we had a big strong movement downward, and it kept going all the way down pretty much until noontime, a little bit over noon at its lows. And then it just sort of chopped around, but it kept building up strength and then finished pretty much flat as to where it opened. So you're going to see a lot of this kind of movement happen on a day-to-day basis. But as an options trader, it doesn't really matter per se as to where and when on this sort of minefield of a day that you decide to open and close your strategy. What's more important is actually how you project where the movement of the strike of the stock is going to be at in your time zone. So since we have 30 DTE is days till expiration, so 37 days is actually what's left onto this on this setup on this position for all 4 of these contracts. So we are not thinking about just from a day-to-day perspective, even though it is important. We want to look at it from where we think the trajectory of this particular stock or ETF is going to go. So if you remember that my parameters for this particular position is sandwiched between 380 and 445, and if you don't want to really have to pay attention to those particular numbers and memorize it, as I move my mouse, hopefully, there you go, you'll see that the price points really plays out. So for that particular low of the day, we were down here, and then for the highs, we were right here. So this big swing of movements really only encapsulates the small range of a big buffer that I had given myself in that trade, right? So that's why in this particular standpoint, from a options management standpoint, we're pretty fine. We can handle a couple of more days, if it were to head down to the south side, before we have to consider maybe either managing this position so that we can adjust, or that we would just decide to close it, or because of the volatility and you don't know which direction the market moves, if we had a couple of movements upward or downwards, we'll be in good shape. So that's the benefit of basically having what's called a delta neutral kind of position in this particular options trade, because since I created a field goal for myself or a range, I don't care which direction really well, actually I do care which direction this particular ETF goes. I'm hoping that it just sort of chops sideways. And in a lot of this uncertainty, especially when the movements isn't very clear, do we rally? Do we panic? Because it's such a ping pong bouncing movement, we can take advantage of that particular situation with this type of strategy. This and another one called a strangle, but we don't really have the liquidity in that particular account to really deal with that. So this is sort of where this position is on literally day 1/day 2 of its existence, and we're hoping that as it decays, you'll start to see the P&L really start to show up. And then of course this line right here, you see this curve, as the days go by, the profits start to really manifest themselves. And in Iron Condor, unlike other strategies, and particularly undefined strategies, you really only start to see your profits emerge as it gets closer to your expiration date. So that's one of the downsides of these defined risk strategies, when you have basically a cap on losses. That's what the definition of defined risk means, is that you have to really, really be within your range, and then you have to really, really wait until the end of this particular contract. So unlike some strategies where I like to basically close a position maybe after only like 10 days it's been out, because there's so much theta decay, there's so much time decay that happens to it, that I reap the benefits of that. There's not really much you can do in this particular situation other than just wait for this. But again, for the amount of capital that got tied up, the risk to reward is still very, very nice relative to the size of the account, because we're dealing with a 272 profit, but the cost basis, or rather the buying power required, was roughly around I'd say almost 300. Let's just call it 300. Based off of when I actually opened the position itself, because I think it was really close to 1-to-1. So hopefully that gives you a window as to what could have happened. I still technically placed the trade, just not in the right account. Obviously, any proceeds from this is not going to go into that account. So the challenge still remains that, 3 days in and I still haven't made any money. So do I really count that as part of like the date? So if today is March 15th, maybe by tomorrow, once I place my first trade, I will denote that as ground zero in terms of being able to track how far and how fast or how long it takes to be able to, let's say, get to $4,000. So yeah, so hopefully this was a little bit enlightening. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave in the comments below. Like and subscribe. You do all the things. It doesn't really matter. I'm just doing this for myself, but hoping that you can learn something along the way. Thank you very much. Take care.